They were told to close their eyes, that the night would swallow them before the soldiers arrived. They were warned that capture meant unspeakable horrors. Acts whispered in bunk rooms, passed like curses through cold corridors. If they take you, their officers had said, you will pray for death before dawn. But no one had prepared them for what really came. The night the enemy finally breached the compound, the alarms never sounded. There was no explosion, no fire, no shouted commands. Only a pressure in the air, an eerie stillness like the world inhaling and refusing to exhale. And then the doors opened. Alara didn't remember running. One moment she had been sorting encrypted field reports under the flickering yellow lamps of the comms hall, and the next she was being herded with 700 others toward the landing pads, shoved into the metal-bellied transport craft that hummed like sleeping beasts. They had lost the war. Everyone knew it. Their outer colonies had fallen in silence, communications severed as if some unseen hand had cut each world from the map. Their own leadership had vanished into bunkers no one was allowed to name. And now the victors, the mysterious, unhuman victors, were coming for them. Alara tightened her grip on her satchel, knuckles whitening. She felt the rumbling of the engines beneath her boots, a rising tremor that shivered through the air as the craft lifted off. Someone wept quietly behind her. Someone else muttered prayers. The girl beside her, a medic with shaking hands, held her own fingers so tightly they slowly turned blue. No one spoke of escape. There was nowhere left to escape to. Alara had always imagined that being captured by the enemy would feel like drowning or burning, or perhaps a kind of spiritual collapse. Something physical. Something brutal. Something loud. But this was quiet. Too quiet. The transport shot upward through the clouds, climbing past the atmosphere until the blue curved into black. Through the cracks in the rusted hull, Alara caught glimpses of the stars, cold, watchful, indifferent. She wondered if every war ended like this, with one side cowering in fear while the other remained unseen, unnamed, and victorious. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The ship jolted once, violently enough to knock several women to the floor. Then a hiss of escaping pressure, a groan of metal, and a light so bright it painted shadows across every face in the hold. They had arrived. Out, a mechanical voice ordered from outside. Not human. Not even close. The hatch yawned open. Alara braced for monstrous figures, scaled warriors with claws, or the tall, dark creatures intelligence reports had sworn could break a woman's spine with a single hand. Instead, she saw sunlight. Warm, golden sunlight. Trees, grass, the sky. And buildings, low, angular structures of pale stone, arranged in perfect symmetry, surrounded by gardens that looked too peaceful to belong to any battlefield. The hell? Someone whispered. They were marched out onto a platform overlooking the strange settlement. A dozen enemy soldiers stood watch, but they were smaller than the legends, sleeker. Their armor shimmered like liquid metal, faces hidden behind mirrored visors. One stepped forward. She was taller than any human woman, her limbs graceful yet sharp-edged, ears tapering into delicate arcs, skin faintly luminescent like polished quartz. She looked more like a living statue carved from moonlight than a soldier. When she spoke, her voice carried surprising softness, like water flowing over stone. You are safe, she said. A lie. Had to be. Alara felt hundreds of women stiffen around her, instinctively huddling closer. We do not harm surrendered combat staff, the alien continued. You will not be imprisoned. You will not be mistreated. You will not be compelled to serve. Her silver eyes swept across them, emotion unreadable. You will rest. Rest? Alara stared. Was this some kind of psychological tactic? A slow, cunning dismantling of morale? The enemy was notorious for its strategic brilliance. Perhaps this was their method, breaking spirits with gentleness instead of force. The alien leader made a small gesture. Gates slid open. Food stalls. Steam rising from ceramic pots. The scent of warm bread. Rows of soft linen tents with open flaps. Bets. Actual bets. What game is this? Someone growled behind Alara. No one answered. They were guided, never shoved, never threatened, down wide stone steps toward the settlement. Children of the enemy species watched from doorways, their luminous eyes curious, not fearful. A few approached shyly, offering small carved figures that resembled animals. Alara refused the one held out to her. Her hands trembled. The medic beside her hesitated, then accepted. Her breath choked with emotion. They're not monsters. But Alara wasn't ready to believe that. Not yet. She had seen the aftermath of their orbital strikes. She had seen cities flattened, soldiers erased, units disappearing in the forest with no bodies ever found. The enemy was merciless in war. Why would they be merciful in victory? The alien leader, noticing the tension, approached Alara directly. "You fear what comes next," she said. Alara lifted her chin, refusing to shrink back. "We know what you do to prisoners." The alien paused. Her eyes dimmed as if weighted by memory. "We do not injure those who surrender," she said again, slower. "We only dismantle weapons and systems, never people." Alara frowned. "Weapons can be rebuilt. People can't." A flicker of something, amusement? Sorrow? Crossed the alien's features. "You misunderstand," she murmured. "You are not our enemies anymore. And we do not intend to break you." Alara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. The alien leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Your own commanders broke you long before we arrived." The words hit harder than any strike. Before Alara could respond, a bell chimed across the settlement. The women were led to their assigned tents, soft beds, clean linens, fresh clothes folded neatly atop each one. And no guards. None. Alara sat slowly, her mind spinning. Everything she had feared was wrong. Everything she had been told was wrong. And yet, that made it worse. Because kindness from an enemy was a different kind of weapon. One far more disarming than cruelty. Outside, the alien leader watched the humans settle. Her expression unreadable. Far in the distance, the sun of this foreign world dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, unsettled to her core. War had taught her to expect violence. But she had never learned how to survive mercy. Alara slept lightly, if sleep was even the right word. Her body rested, but her mind stalked the edges of every sound. The rustle of fabric, the distant hum of alien machinery, the soft footfalls of early morning patrols. She kept expecting the illusion to break, for the warmth and silence to be torn away and replaced with cold metal walls and shackles. But dawn came gently. Pale gold seeped into the tent, warming the linen, touching her face like a hesitant hand. Outside, she heard low voices, women from her own ranks murmuring to one another, comparing their dreams, their doubts, their fears. Alara rose slowly, pressing a palm to her temple. Her pulse still felt too loud, too suspicious. When she stepped outside, she froze. The settlement looked different in daylight, so much more alive. Alien children chased each other across the stone paths, their crystal-like skin sparkling. Tall warriors in iridescent armor guided small groups of human women toward a long communal building. The smell of fresh bread, broth, and something fruity floated on the air. "Morning," a familiar voice whispered. It was Lyra, the medic from the transport, her hands no longer trembling. She already wore the loose, cream-colored robes left out for them. "They're giving us breakfast," Lyra said, her expression torn between relief and uncertainty. "Real food." Alara folded her arms tightly. "Food can be poisoned." Lyra gave her a soft look. "So can silence, Alara." They walked together toward the hall. No guards blocked their path. No weapons. No surveillance drones circling above. The enemy, whatever their species called itself, seemed content to simply watch from a distance. Inside the hall, round stone tables were arranged beneath high arches carved with swirling patterns. Light filtered through translucent panels in the ceiling, shifting in gentle waves like water. Bowls of food waited at each table, steaming grains, sliced fruits with glowing centers, warm loaves that smelled faintly of honey. No one forced them to eat. Most women stared at their bowls, suspicious. A few whispered that it was a trick. But hunger won battles too, and slowly, cautiously, spoons lifted. Lyra tasted first. Her eyes widened. "It's good." Alara remained rigid. A shadow fell across her table. She tensed, ready for commands or demands or threats. But it was the alien leader from yesterday. Up close in daylight, she was even more unsettling. Her features were elegant, carved in alien symmetry. Her skin shimmered faintly, like starlight trapped in glass. And her presence, calm, unhurried, seemed to quiet the room by existing alone. "May I join you?" she asked. The question shocked Alara almost more than the aliens themselves. They had leaders who asked permission? Lyra nodded too quickly. Alara nodded too slowly. The alien sat with a kind of effortless grace, folding her long limbs beneath her. She introduced herself. I am Senra, first liaison of the Archeal Dominion. Archeal. The name whispered through Alara's mind, stirring memories, coded transmissions, intercepted signals, panicked reports from the front lines. The Archeal were ghosts during the war. No one had seen them directly until the last months when entire battalions vanished. You're the ones who took our worlds, Alara said carefully. Senra didn't flinch. We ended a war your leaders began. That made several nearby women stiffen. Alara's throat tightened. Then why are we here? She demanded. Senra folded her hands, fingers long and jointed in ways not entirely human. Because war leaves wounds on all sides. We do not discard those who surrender. We give them time to recover. Alara's jaw clenched. Recover for what? Forced labor? Conversion? Re-education? A faint smile tugged at Senra's lips. Not everything we do is a strategy, Alara. The use of her name startled her. How did you? We studied your ranks, your roles, your faces. Not to control, Senra said softly, but to understand. The table fell silent. Understanding was far more dangerous than control. Senra's gaze swept across the hall. Some of you were clerks, healers, technicians. None of you commanded armies. None of you chose your leader's path. You were caught in its wake. Alara swallowed hard. The words hit too close. Memories surfaced. Her commanding officer shouting orders that made no tactical sense. Entire units sent into doomed battles, lies fed to them as truth. Lyra cleared her throat. What happens now? You rest, Senra repeated. Eat, sleep, rebuild your minds. When you are ready, you will have choices. Alara froze. Choices? Senra rose smoothly, her crystal silver eyes meeting hers. We do not keep prisoners. When ready, you may leave Archeal grounds. Live as civilians. Return to your people. Or stay. Stay. The hall erupted in whispers. Alara's heart pounded. None of this aligned with anything she'd been taught. Mercy was not a weapon her enemy ever used, because mercy required vulnerability. Mercy required opening yourself to being hurt. Why would a victorious empire risk that? Senra stepped away, but before leaving she turned back once. Alara, she said softly, strength does not only mean enduring hardship. It also means accepting peace when it is offered. And then she was gone. Lyra exhaled shakily. She's not what I expected. Alara pushed her untouched bowl away. None of this is what we expected. She stood abruptly and walked outside, needing air. The settlement buzzed with quiet life, alien artisans sketching on stone boards, human women exploring cautiously, children weaving through gardens. But beyond the peaceful facade, Alara sensed something else. Attention beneath the surface. A secret in the way the Archeal watched them, not like guards but like observers waiting for an outcome. She didn't know what that outcome was. Yet. As the morning sun climbed higher, Alara felt a truth settling like a weight in her chest. The Archeal didn't want to break them. They wanted something far more complicated. Understanding. Integration. Maybe even connection. And that terrified her more than any battlefield ever had. Alara spent the rest of the morning wandering the edge of the settlement, tracing the curve of the stone pathways until they met the boundary wall, if it could even be called a wall. It was low, barely waist-high, made of pale blue stone that shimmered under the sun. A barrier that couldn't keep anyone in, yet seemed designed to make people hesitate before stepping beyond it. Several women had already tested it. Alara saw their tracks in the fine dust where they had paced back and forth, torn between freedom and fear. She wasn't ready to cross it either. Not until she understood what lay beyond. From the vantage point, she could see the alien world sweeping outward, rolling fields of silvery grass, glittering like frost under the bright sky. Strange trees with translucent leaves shimmered in the distance. Bands of creatures moved gracefully across the plains, deer-like, but with glassy horns and soft luminescent stripes along their backs. It was beautiful. Too beautiful. Beauty was a weapon too if used correctly. Alara sat on the wall, arms folded on her knees, listening to the faint hum of an Archeal hovercraft gliding overhead. It cast a shifting halo of light on the ground as it passed. No threat. No rush. as if merely monitoring the settlement without intruding. Mind if I join you? Lyra's voice came from behind. Alara didn't turn. You already did. Lyra sat anyway, clutching a warm cup between her palms. They gave us these. Some kind of tea. It's sweet. She took a sip and exhaled. Honestly, I feel like I've stepped into someone else's dream. It's not a dream, Alara said. Dreams don't come with so many unanswered questions. Lyra bumped her shoulder lightly. That's why you're sitting out here instead of eating. Alara didn't reply. The wind swept over the plains, carrying a faint hum, almost like singing. She didn't know if it was the grass, the creatures, or the world itself. Lyra watched her for a long moment. You don't have to figure everything out in one morning. Yes, Alara murmured, I do. Why? Because someone had to. Because not understanding the enemy was a weakness. Because survival depended on anticipating the next move. Because trust was dangerous. But Alara only said, I don't believe anything can be this easy. Lyra opened her mouth, but another voice cut in, smooth, calm, and unmistakably alien. That is wise. Alara stiffened. Senra stood a few steps behind them, her silhouette rimmed with sunlight. Even in daylight, her presence was startling, an ethereal mix of beauty and something sharper, like starlight that could cut. I hope I did not interrupt, Senra said. You didn't, Lyra replied quickly, nudging Alara again, harder this time. Alara forced herself to face the alien. Do you always watch us? Senra tilted her head, expression unreadable. We observe. Observation keeps us from repeating the mistakes of your leaders. Alara bristled. Meaning what, exactly? Senra walked closer, her feet whispering softly against the stone. Meaning fear makes people cruel. Fear makes rulers blind. Fear makes soldiers obey orders they know are wrong. Alara's pulse quickened. It felt as though Senra were peeling back layers of her thoughts. We had orders too, Alara said tightly. We didn't choose this war. I know, Senra replied simply. That is why you are not prisoners. Lyra studied Senra with open curiosity. Then what are we? Guess, Senra said. Protected civilians until you decide your path. The word guess felt like a lie wrapped in silk. Alara crossed her arms. Why? She asked. Senra regarded her for a long moment, the sunlight catching in her silver eyes. Because the war was not your doing. And because we believe in balance, not vengeance. That answer was too clean. Too gentle. Too rehearsed. And what do you expect from us in return? Alara pressed. Senra didn't waver. Nothing. You owe us nothing. Alara didn't believe that for a second. But Lyra leaned forward eagerly. Then, we can leave? Not immediately, Senra said. Your world is in chaos. Borders are shifting. Armies are dissolving. Many of your cities are uninhabitable. If you left now, you would walk into danger. Alara narrowed her eyes. So we are trapped. Senra met her gaze calmly. Safe. Not trapped. There is a difference. Not to people who lost their home, Alara said. The alien leader's voice softened. Which is why we will give you time to heal. When you are ready, we will take you wherever you wish to go. Lyra inhaled sharply. Wherever. Yes, Senra said. Alara's mind raced. If she was telling the truth, this was a generosity Alara couldn't understand. And if she was lying, then they were all trapped inside a gilded cage. Senra stepped closer, close enough that Alara could see faint veins of light threading beneath her skin like living constellations. You do not trust us, Senra said gently. I do not blame you. Trust must be earned. She extended a hand, not in command but in offering. Come. Let me show you something. Lyra looked at Alara, eyes bright with cautious hope. Alara hesitated. But Senra's stare held no threat. Only an infuriating patience. After several long seconds, Alara rose. Fine, she muttered. Show me. Senra led them along a curving path toward the far end of the settlement, where the buildings grew fewer and the gardens wilder. Their footsteps crunched softly in the silver grass. What is this place? Alara asked. A sanctuary, Senra said. Not a prison. They reached a circular clearing surrounded by trees that shimmered with soft blue light. In the center was a large stone basin filled with water so clear it looked like a mirror laid flat. One by one holographic images flickered above its surface. destroyed cities, burned forests, collapsed bunkers, and people, terrified civilians, displaced families, children huddling in makeshift shelters. Human children. These are your worlds, Senra said quietly. The ones still trying to survive. Lyra covered her mouth. Alara felt her breath break in her chest. We captured no civilians, Senra continued. Only soldiers and staff. We did not strike refugee convoys. We did not destroy agricultural stations. But your leaders did. To their own people. Alara stood frozen. Senra looked at her with something like sorrow. You were lied to, Alara. Fed fear so you would march without question. The images faded, replaced by the still water. Alara turned away, unable to breathe. Senra spoke softly behind her. You asked what we expect of you. The answer is nothing. But what we hope, she paused, is that truth will free you from the chains your leaders left behind. Alara stared at the trees, fighting the tightness in her throat. She hated how the truth felt like a wound. She hated how it felt like relief too. Lyra touched her arm gently. Alara didn't pull away. Behind them, Senra's voice was barely above a whisper. This war broke you, she said. Peace will be harder. But you will not face it alone. Alara closed her eyes. For the first time since capture, she wasn't sure if she feared the Archeal, or the truth they brought with them. That night, the sky above the Archeal settlement bloomed in colors Alara had never seen before. Ribbons of violet, sapphire, and molten gold rippling across the darkness. The alien aurora, Lyra whispered, was a seasonal phenomenon. Beautiful. Calming. Alara felt anything but calm. She lay awake long after most women drifted into uneasy sleep. The peaceful humming of alien insects outside only made her more restless. Her mind replayed the images Senra had shown. The broken cities, the starving civilians, the hollow-eyed children. Her own people's leaders had done that. To their own citizens. And the Archeal had not. She hated that her world felt inverted. She hated that the enemy offered clarity, while her own memories offered nothing but confusion and disillusionment. Unable to lie still any longer, Alara slipped out of the tent. The night air was crisp, carrying a faint metallic tang from the glowing leaves overhead. The paths were lit by embedded stones that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Most of the settlement slept, but a few Archeal sentinels stood watch at a distance. Silent, statuesque, more observers than guards. Alara walked until her feet led her to the sanctuary clearing again. The basin of still water reflecting the aurora above like a cosmic mirror. She wasn't alone. Senra stood beside the basin, her back turned, her long form outlined in pale blue glow. The alien leader looked almost ghostly under the shifting sky, her skin catching light like polished crystal. Alara stiffened. Are you following me? No, Senra didn't turn. You are simply not the only one who finds rest difficult. Alara hesitated before stepping into the clearing. I didn't take you for someone who had trouble sleeping. Senra's mouth curved faintly. We do not sleep as humans do. But we meditate. Reflect. Alara snorted softly. On what? War strategies? Victory celebrations? That finally made Senra turn. Her expression was unreadable, but the set of her jaw was sharper than usual. We do not celebrate victory, she said calmly. War may bring survival. It never brings joy. Alara opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't know what she'd expected. Anger? Gloating? Condescension? Not sorrow. Senra stepped closer to the basin. Your people fought with courage, discipline, determination. We recognize those qualities. It is why we never underestimated you. Alara crossed her arms, instinctively defensive. Yet you still won. Yes, Senra said softly. Because your leaders fought to preserve their power. We fought to end the cycle. Alara frowned. Cycle? Of conquest. Of retaliation. Of fear passed from one generation to the next. Senra dipped her long fingers into the water. Ripples of cold blue light spread across the surface. We learned long ago that fear destroys civilizations more effectively than any weapon. Alara stepped forward despite herself. You say that as if you've lived through it. Senra's gaze drifted upward toward the shimmering sky. My people nearly annihilated themselves centuries ago. Different nations. Different castes. Different ideologies. Each convinced the other was a threat too dangerous to leave alive. She paused. It took losing almost everything to realize we were wrong. Alara folded her arms tighter, unsettled by the familiarity of that story. And now you're trying to fix us? She asked. No, Senra said. We cannot fix what we did not break. But we can stop the wound from spreading. Alara sank onto the edge of the basin, watching the glowing ripples fade. For a moment neither spoke. Then Senra asked quietly, Why are you awake, Alara? Alara stiffened. Couldn't sleep. That is not an answer. Alara clenched her jaw. Everything you showed us today, it was too much. It was the truth. That doesn't make it easier. No, Senra's voice softened. Truth rarely is. The silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken things. Fear, guilt, anger, questions Alara still didn't know how to articulate. Finally, Senra said, You are not responsible for what your superiors did. Alara's chest tightened. I followed their orders. You followed because you believed you had no choice. Alara's voice cracked. Isn't that the same thing? No. Alara looked away. My unit, the last one I served with, we were told that surrender meant torture. Dissection. That you would turn us into research specimens or slaves. And then I saw what your forces did to our outposts, how precise, how efficient, how merciless. Senra lowered herself to sit beside her. Precision is not cruelty. It looked like cruelty. Because you were afraid, Senra said gently. And fear paints even mercy as threat. Alara swallowed hard. Her throat burned. Then why did you show us those images? She whispered. Why show me what my own people did? Why force it on us? Senra looked at her, eyes glimmering like molten silver. Because lies are chains. You deserve to see what truly happened. Not what you were told. Alara closed her eyes. She didn't want to cry, not in front of the enemy, not in front of anyone. But the pressure behind her eyes throbbed. I don't know what to believe anymore, she murmured. Senra placed a hand, cool, gentle, on Alara's forearm. Then believe nothing until you decide for yourself. Alara opened her eyes. Senra continued, We will give you every answer you ask for. Every document, every record, every piece of evidence. You will build your own truth piece by piece. Alara stared at her. Why do you care? Senra's voice was barely above a whisper. Because the war took enough from you. Peace should not take the rest. Alara didn't know how to respond to that. So she simply sat there beside the alien leader, watching the aurora ripple across the sky, listening to the soft hum of distant alien creatures, feeling the cool presence of someone who should have been her mortal enemy, but instead felt like the first honest voice she'd heard in years. After a long time, Senra rose. You should rest. I'll try, Alara said quietly. Senra turned to leave but paused. Alara, she said softly, healing is not weakness. Her voice lingered in the clearing long after she was gone. Alara sat alone beneath the shimmering sky, staring into the glowing basin, wondering, terrified, if she was finally starting to believe her. The auroras came again that night, draping the sky in slow ribbons of molten green. For a moment Arya forgot she was a prisoner, until the perimeter lights flickered on, snapping the world back into the shape of fences and watchtowers and rules. She lay awake on her bunk, staring at the wooden ceiling, replaying the day in fragments. Sergeant Hale bringing her bread, Captain Rowan stopping the guards from dragging Lyra away, a child of breath singing to herself in the laundry room like captivity had never found her. Every moment felt wrong. Wrong because she didn't know how to explain the pounding inside her chest. Wrong because everything she had been taught her whole life whispered, This is a trap. This is the first step before the knife. And wrong because some part of her wanted desperately, shamefully, to believe that maybe it wasn't. Sleep finally claimed her in uneven pulses, but the morning ripped her awake far too early. Someone was shouting outside the barracks. Arya rolled off the bunk and joined the women crowding toward the door. Outside, a squad of American soldiers stood in tight formation. Their rifles were slung, not raised. A new officer, tall and silver-haired, stepped forward. Listen up, he barked, voice carrying across the courtyard. Starting today, the work rotations are changing. Some of you will be assigned to construction, some to cooking, some to clerical duties. We're evaluating skills. No one is being punished. This is logistical. In Arya's ear, Sela muttered, logistical usually means terrible. Maybe. But Arya noticed something subtle. Every assignment board was paired with a translator. No one shouted. No one used cattle prods like back home. Some of the women were already arguing with each other about who was better suited to what. For the first time the camp hummed with something unfamiliar. It wasn't fear. It was movement, structure, a plan. Arya was assigned to the clerical hut, records and communications. The phrase alone made her heart tighten. Communications was sacred to her people. They shared their history by recording sounds and echoes through hollow shards, not paper. But clerical work? That she understood. She had been a signals operator all through the war, fingers moving across devices older than she was, her thoughts bent to the rhythm of coded bursts and pulse hums. Inside the hut, she found herself face to face with Captain Rowan. "Oh," she blurted before she could stop herself. Rowan looked up from a stack of forms. "You again?" he said lightly. "Try not to destroy my office." Heat climbed Arya's ears. "I didn't." He lifted a brow. It was a joke, she realized. A stupid, tiny joke. She looked away so he wouldn't see the ridiculous way it had flustered her. "Sit," he said, tapping a chair beside his desk. "You'll help organize personnel records for the non-humans. Some of your people don't read Terran Common. I'm assuming you do." Arya hesitated, then nodded. Fluently. "Good. It'll make this a lot easier." For the next hour they worked in near silence. Papers sliding, folders opening, the soft scratching of pens. Arya kept her eyes on the pages even when she felt his gaze flick toward her now and then. It was unbearable, the way his presence seemed to sharpen the air. "Arya," Rowan said suddenly. She froze. "Why were you sent to the front?" he asked. "You don't strike me as someone who volunteered." Arya's jaw clenched. "I didn't. Press ganged? Something like that." She didn't want to tell him about the recruitment halls, the officials shouting about duty and survival, the way village elders forced the young to step forward because the Dominion demanded bodies. She didn't want him to hear the shame in her voice. But Rowan didn't push. He simply nodded and returned to his work. The quiet that followed wasn't hostile. It was almost gentle. When midday rations were called, Arya stepped outside expecting the usual, meager protein paste, boiled grain mash. Instead she smelled something rich and warm drifting on the air. Stew. Actual stew. Women lined up under the long metal awning, bewildered murmurs spreading. Bowls were passed. Bread too. Thick slices, fresh. Arya stared at hers like it might vanish if she blinked. Lyra approached, bowl steaming in her hands. "This is a trick, yes?" "It has to be," Arya whispered. But when she tasted it, when the warmth filled her mouth, her throat, her chest, her eyes burned. She turned away so no one could see. The Americans weren't starving them. They weren't beating them. They weren't what she had been told. And that was worse. Cruelty she could resist. But kindness? That unmade her defenses piece by fragile piece. Kindness forced questions she had been raised never to ask. Why would an enemy treat them this way? Why was Rowan gentle? And why, God's help her, did it matter? After lunch, Hale approached her at the edge of the courtyard. "You look better," he said. "I'm not." He chuckled. "Fair enough. Some of the others are asking if you'd help teach them Terran Common letters. Our manuals aren't made for non-human languages." Arya blinked. "You want me to teach?" "Voluntary," Hale said. "No pressure." She almost said no. Almost walked away. But something held her. Maybe if she taught she could stay busy. Keep her mind from spiraling toward questions she didn't want answers for. "I'll do it," she said quietly. Hale smiled. "Knew you would." The classroom was an empty storage shed. The students, 6 women, 2 of them from the Children of Breath tribes, sat on crates and overturned buckets. Arya held a chalk stub in her shaking hand. "Language is pattern," she began. "Pattern is repetition. Repetition becomes memory." The words flowed more easily than she expected. As she taught them the shapes of letters, she realized with a shock that she liked this, sharing knowledge without fear. Helping instead of surviving. For 2 hours they practiced, erased and practiced again. When Arya dismissed them, they left smiling. Smiling despite the fences and guards and watchtowers. Arya stepped outside into the fading violet dusk and exhaled. Something inside her had shifted today. Not enough to trust. Not enough to change loyalty. But enough to unsettle her bones. Enough to make her ask quietly into the night sky, what if the stories were wrong? Enough to make her wonder what Rowan saw when he looked at her. And enough, finally, to admit to herself. The enemy was breaking them. Not with torture. Not with fear. But with the impossible weight of kindness. And Arya didn't know how to fight that. The storm rolled in without warning, thick, metallic clouds grinding slow circles over the camp like a wounded giant breathing. The wind cut sharp and cold, carrying flecks of iron dust that stung against Arya's cheeks as she hurried across the courtyard toward the clerical hut. Rowan was already inside, sleeves rolled up, hair ruffled like he'd been fighting the weather itself. He looked up when she stepped in. "You're early," he said, half smiling. "A storm interferes with the echo beacons," she replied. "I couldn't sleep." Her people, children of the Shard, were sensitive to pressure shifts. Tonight the world felt unstable, like the sky was holding its breath. Rowan nodded. "Well, since you're here, help me sort these." He tapped 2 crates stamped with blue ink. Medical, and Human. New arrivals. They'll need translated notes. Arya knelt beside the crates, lifting folders one by one. Medical histories, species physiology, treatment records. She hesitated on a thin file marked with a red strip. "What's this?" she asked. Rowan glanced over. "Special case. Injured during capture. Needs surgery." Arya froze. "Surgery? On who?" "You might know her," he said gently. "Lyra." Her stomach dropped. Lyra, the soft-spoken girl from the laundry room, the one who still hummed lullabies like she refused to let the war steal her voice. "What kind of injury?" Arya whispered. "Spinal fracture. She hit it during intake. She's been walking on nerve damage for days." Rowan exhaled heavily. "If we don't operate soon, she may never walk again." Arya's fingers tightened around the folder. "Is this punishment?" "No," he said firmly. "This is saving her." It didn't make sense. Nothing the Americans did made sense. The Dominion taught them humans were sadists in waiting, cruel by nature, vicious by instinct. Yet these soldiers offered medical care. They gave bread. They taught games to the children in the juvenile wing. They let Arya teach language classes. This was not what an enemy did. But before she could say anything, the door slammed open. Hale burst in, uniform soaked with rain. "Captain, trouble at the women's barracks. One of Arya's people." He shot her a guilty look. "A child of breath has collapsed." Arya's heart lurched. "Who?" "Older one," Hale said. "Blue patterns on her arms." Arya didn't wait. She ran. The storm howled as she sprinted across the courtyard. Mud splashed up her legs, soaking her boots, but she didn't slow until she shoved her way into Barracks 3. Inside, women crowded around a bunk. A child of breath elder, Meryl, one of the weavers, lay trembling, her lungs clicking wetly with every breath. Blue luminescent lines crackled across her skin, pulsing irregularly. A sign of respiratory collapse. Arya pushed through. "Give her space." The women obeyed instantly. Arya knelt beside Meryl, lifting her gently. "Breathe with me," she murmured. "Slow. Slow." Meryl's eyes fluttered. "The air, it burns." Children of breath relied on thin, high-altitude oxygen. The thicker atmosphere of this planet strained their lungs, even with adaptation bruise. Without proper treatment, their organs could fail. Rowan and Hale rushed in seconds later. Rowan crouched beside her. "What does she need?" Arya swallowed hard. "She needs a vapor mask and a low-oxygen mix. And heat along the spinal lines." Rowan looked to Hale. "Get the medkit, the compressor, and an oxygen bleed valve. Now." Hale bolted. Arya met Rowan's eyes, steady, calm, determined. He wasn't afraid of her. Or of what her species could do. He was simply focused on saving a woman he'd never met. A warmth spread through Arya's chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. But needed. "Keep her upright," Rowan said. "I am," Arya whispered. Meryl's breath rattled. She leaned into Arya weakly, fingers clutching her sleeve. "Child?" Meryl gasped. "Forgive me." "For what?" Arya asked. "For thinking the humans would kill us all." A faint smile trembled at her lips. "But they are trying." Arya's throat tightened. "Don't talk. Just breathe." Hale returned with the equipment. Rowan set the valve to bleed oxygen into the mask until the mix thinned enough for Meryl's physiology. Arya applied heat pressure to the spinal lines, channeling warmth through her palms the way the healers taught her as a child. Minutes passed like hours. When Meryl's breathing finally steadied, Arya sagged with relief. Rowan exhaled too. "She'll live." Arya glanced up at him, and saw something in his face that struck her deeper than she expected. Respect. Not condescension. Not fear. Not pity. Respect. And it hurt more than cruelty ever could. They carried Meryl to the infirmary, the rain washing mud from Arya's hands as she walked beside the stretcher. When they arrived, the human medics took over with practiced precision. Rowan stepped aside, letting Arya watch from the doorway. You did well, he said quietly. She could have died. But she didn't. Because of you. Arya stared at her hands, still trembling faintly from the energy she pushed into Meryl's spine. I'm supposed to hate you. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Rowan didn't flinch. Do you? Silence stretched. The storm rumbled overhead, shaking the metal roof. Arya opened her mouth. She didn't know what she meant to say, but a sudden cry echoed from outside. Another guard rushing in. Captain. Fight in the mess hall. Rowan groaned. Of course there is. Then to Arya. Stay here. No, she said. If it's my people I should. He didn't argue. He just nodded once. Let's go. The mess hall was chaos. 2 Dominion women were screaming in broken common, chairs overturned around them. A young human guard stood pinned against the wall, hands raised defensively. The air hummed with tension. The older Dominion woman shouted, "He touched her. He laid hands on her." I didn't, the guard protested. I just tried to stop her from slipping. Arya forced her way forward. Stop, she snapped in her native tongue. Both women froze. Arya stepped between them and the guard. Explain. The younger woman trembled. I fell. The human grabbed my arm. I thought, her voice cracked. I thought he meant harm. Arya understood instantly. Trauma, expectation, instinctive fear. He was helping, Arya said gently. The women looked ashamed. Rowan addressed the guard. Next time use your voice first, not your hands. Yes, sir. Arya's shoulders slowly relaxed as the tension drained from the room. Another crisis solved. Another small fracture repaired. But walking back to the infirmary with Rowan at her side, she realized something chilling. She was no longer fighting the humans. She was helping them. Working with them. Becoming something she wasn't supposed to be. Rowan paused under the awning, rain dripping from his hair. He studied her with that steady, disarming gaze. Arya, he said softly, you're not our prisoner. You're our responsibility. And I take that seriously. The words hit her like a blow. Because being a prisoner was easier. Being seen was not. She turned away before he could read the turmoil on her face. But she knew the truth. This camp was changing her. And change, real change, was the one thing she'd been taught to fear more than death.